All right, so are you ready to dive back into cybersecurity?
Always.
Today, we're going deep, like really deep, into some real-world questions from a CISA final exam.
Oh, wow, CISA, that's Certified Information Systems Auditor, right?
Yeah, exactly. These are the kinds of challenges that cybersecurity pros actually face.
Those exams are no joke. They really test your knowledge.
Okay, so let's jump right in, starting with question 121. It talks about an auditor finding unauthorized access requests, in an identity management system. So what should happen next?
Okay, so the knee-jerk reaction might be to, freak out, right? But the correct answer here is to investigate further before jumping to conclusions. The auditor needs to, do some more analysis.
Oh, so it's kind of like being a detective. You got to gather all the evidence before you can, solve the case.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, question 122 is all about hackers stealing passwords without even touching a computer. Is that even possible?
It is, and it's more common than you might think. It's called social engineering.
Social engineer.
Yeah. So basically, hackers, they use psychology, tricking people into giving up sensitive information. Think phishing emails or maybe someone impersonating tech support over the phone.
So instead of breaking through firewalls, they target the human element. Tricky. What are some red flags people should watch out for, to avoid these scams?
Well, one thing to watch for is a sense of urgency. Like an email saying your account's been hacked and you need to change your password right now.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
Right. Always verify the source before clicking anything.
Okay, yeah, I'm probably guilty of clicking without thinking sometimes.
Ah.
Good reminder. So question 123 talks about IT projects going over budget and delivering more than what was asked for.
Yes, that's a classic example of scope creep.
Scope creep.
Basically, when a project's scope isn't clearly defined, it can grow and grow.
Like a monster.
Exactly. That's where project scope management comes in, setting clear boundaries and sticking to the plan.
So it's about having a solid blueprint and, resisting the urge to add extra bells and whistles.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Question 124 brings up something I think is often overlooked in software acquisition. User participation. Why is it so important to involve users when choosing new software?
Well, software is ultimately a tool to support business processes, and users are the ones who'll be using it day in and day out.
Right, so their input is crucial to make sure the software actually meets their needs.
Absolutely. It's like designing a car without talking to the driver. You might end up with something that looks cool but isn't practical.
Totally. Okay, shifting gears a bit to HR policies.
Yeah.
Question 125 asks about a red flag an IS auditor should be looking for.
The absence of a termination checklist. It's crucial to have a process for deactivating accounts and retrieving company property when an employee leaves.
Well, like changing the locks when someone moves out, right?
Exactly.
Now, question 126 deals with spooling. What is that, and why is it a security concern?
So spooling is basically a temporary storage for print jobs.
Okay.
The concern is that sensitive data can be accessed if the spooling system isn't secure.
So it's like leaving confidential documents in a public copy room.
Exactly. Strong access controls and encryption are crucial here.
Okay, so multiple layers of protection are needed. Makes sense. Question 127 is about hackers gathering information about encrypted data, but without actually decrypting it. How?
They use something called traffic analysis. They're looking at patterns in network traffic.
So even if they can't read the message, they can learn something from how it's being sent.
That's the idea.
Fascinating. All right, let's get into computer forensics with question 128. What's the most important thing for an IS auditor to consider when dealing with evidence from an investigation?
Preservation, absolutely. Maintaining the integrity of the evidence is paramount.
So it's like handling a delicate artifact. You don't want to contaminate it.
Exactly. There's a meticulous chain of custody process to follow.
Okay, question 129 is about disaster recovery planning. It says that even when maintenance is done right, there's a key concern for IS auditors. What is it?
The timing of that maintenance. You don't want to disrupt critical operations.
Oh, right. It's like trying to fix a plane's engine while it's in flight.
Exactly. Scheduling maintenance during off-peak hours is crucial.
That makes perfect sense. Moving on to user accounts, question 130 presents a situation where multiple users are logging in with the same ID and password. What's the issue here?
Lack of accountability, plain and simple. If everyone's using the same login, you can't track who did what.
Right, it's like trying to solve a crime where everyone has the same alibi.
Exactly. The takeaway here is one user, one account. No sharing allowed.
Got it. No more sharing passwords. Okay, question 131 asks about something important to verify when you're reviewing an organization's list of approved software.
The key here is to make sure the risks of using those products are regularly assessed.
Oh, so it's not just about being licensed and up to date. We need to understand the security risks too.
Absolutely. Software vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered.
Okay, so organizations need to stay informed and be proactive about patching those vulnerabilities. Question 132 is about keeping wired and wireless networks secure, especially when you have employees who need access to both. What's the most secure way to handle that?
Two physically separate networks. It's the most secure option.
Oh, okay. Having two separate buildings with different security measures.
Exactly. Now, switching to auditing techniques, question 133 asks about the best sampling method when an IS auditor is concerned about fraud.
Fraud, that's scary.
It is. The most effective method here is discovery sampling.
Discovery sampling. So does that mean analyzing every single transaction?
Not exactly. It focuses on a small sample of transactions that are most likely to contain fraud.
Ah, so you're targeting the suspicious ones instead of looking at everything.
Precisely.
That sounds much more efficient. All right, question 134 brings up those tiny programs that run in our browsers. Java applets and ActiveX controls.
Oh, yes, those.
So when is it safe to allow them to run on our systems?
The key is knowing the source of the executable file.
Okay, so just like downloading apps, sticking to trusted sources is crucial.
Exactly. Look for digital signatures, check the publisher's information, and of course, keep your browser updated.
Makes sense. Okay, question 135 asks about the benefit of an IS auditor having direct access to general ledger data. Why is that important?
It provides greater assurance of data validity. Direct access means the auditor can verify the data independently.
So it's like getting your news straight from the source, right?
Exactly. You're less likely to encounter bias or errors.
That makes a lot of sense. Question 136 is about preventative maintenance for data center systems. It says, even if maintenance is done correctly, there's something an IS auditor should consider. What is it?
You guessed it, the timing. Again, it's crucial to schedule maintenance during off-peak hours.
Right, we don't want to disrupt those critical systems during peak times. It's like trying to fix a traffic light during rush hour.
Oh, perfect analogy. Question 137 revisits user accounts. What should an IS auditor be most concerned about when they find multiple users logging in with the same user ID and password?
Well, we talked about this earlier. Isn't it lack of accountability? It'd be impossible to know who did what.
That's exactly right. It's a major security risk.
So the takeaway is the same. One user, one account, no exceptions.
Precisely. Now, question 138 focuses on ensuring a message is authentic. How do we make sure a message really came from who it claims to be from?
Good question. How do we do that?
The gold standard is encrypting the message's hash code using the sender's private key. This is the basis of digital signatures.
I've heard of digital signatures, but how do they actually work?
Imagine it as a digital fingerprint, unique to the sender and the message. The sender encrypts a summary of the message using their private key, a key that only they have.
Okay, I'm following so far.
Then the recipient can use the sender's public key to decrypt it. If it matches, you know the message is authentic and hasn't been tampered with.
So it's like a two-factor authentication for messages.
Yeah.
That's really clever. Now, question 139 asks about something an IS auditor needs to assess when reviewing procedures for restoring a software application after an upgrade.
It's all about the fallback procedures. What happens if the upgrade goes wrong?
So it's like having a plan B in case things go sideways.
Exactly. You need to be able to roll back to the previous version or implement workarounds.
It's like an undo button for software upgrades.
Yeah.
I like it. Question 140 describes a company's server as getting infected with a Trojan after deploying new software from a vendor. What could have prevented this?
Intrusion detection and prevention systems, also known as IDSs and IPSs, they're like security guards for your network.
Oh, so they monitor traffic for anything suspicious?
Precisely. They can block malicious activity or sound the alarm.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about hidden fields on web pages. Question 141 asks about an attack that can exploit this technique.
That would be parameter tampering.
Parameter tampering. Can you break that down for us?
Imagine these hidden fields on a web page, like secret compartments that store information.
Okay.
Hackers can intercept communication and modify those hidden parameters.
Oh, so they can mess with the application's behavior.
Exactly. Developers can use input validation and encryption to protect against this.
So it's about anticipating potential vulnerabilities and mitigating the risks. Makes sense. Okay, question 142 asks about the most significant factor in the success of implementing application systems.
The biggest factor is the overall organizational environment.
Oh, so it's not just about the technology itself.
Right. Things like leadership support, user involvement, communication, and training all play a crucial role.
It's like planting a seed. You need the right soil and environment for it to flourish. Speaking of the right environment, let's talk about information security policies. Question 143 mentions a red flag an IS auditor might find when reviewing such a policy.
A big red flag is when the policy is solely driven by IT objectives and not aligned with the overall business goals.
Isn't IT responsible for information security, though?
They are, but an effective security policy needs to reflect the entire organization's needs and risks.
So it's about a holistic approach to security, considering the whole organization. All right, question 144 brings up another technical term, cyclic redundancy check, or CRC. What is it used for?
It's commonly used to check the integrity of a downloaded program.
Okay, so make sure the file wasn't corrupted during download.
Right, it's like a digital fingerprint. If even a single bit changes, the CRC will be different.
That's really clever. Now, when it comes to open source software, question 145 asks about the safest way to update it, especially when there's no single developer producing patches.
The most secure approach is to carefully vet and test any patches before applying them.
So you can't just blindly install any patch you find.
Nope, not all patches are created equal. Some might be poorly coded or even contain malicious code.
So it's like doing your research before hiring a contractor. You want to make sure they're reputable. Okay, let's move on to question 146.
It asks about a helpful way for an IS auditor to evaluate the quality of newly developed software. The answer is to analyze the reporting of the mean time between failures, or MTBF, over time.
So we're looking at how often the software crashes or has errors.
Exactly. MTBF is a common metric for assessing software reliability.
Got it. Let's talk about recovery strategies. Question 147 asks about the best strategy when the recovery time objective, or RTO, is high.
In that case, a cold site is the most appropriate.
Okay, can you explain what a cold site is?
A cold site is like a bare-bones backup facility. It has space and basic infrastructure, but no pre-configured hardware or software.
Oh, so it's like having a spare room, but it needs furniture and everything before you can move in.
A great analogy. Cold sites are the cheapest option, but they take the longest to set up.
Right, that makes sense. Question 148 is about data collection during an IS audit. What should determine how much data is collected?
The purpose and scope of the audit should guide the extent of data collection.
So you don't just gather everything.
No, it's important to be focused and collect only the data that's relevant to the audit's objectives.
You don't want to drown in a sea of irrelevant data.
Uh.
Okay, on to question 149.
This one's about a common challenge in information systems, figuring out why they often fail to meet user needs. What do you think are some contributing factors?
Well, based on what we've talked about, I'd say maybe not involving users enough when defining the system's requirements could be a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's exactly what this question highlights. The most common reason is that users aren't adequately involved when the system's requirements are being defined. It's like building a house without talking to the family that's going to live there.
Yeah, you might end up with something that looks amazing but doesn't actually meet their needs.
Exactly. Form over function. Not good.
All right, and for our final question, number 150, it looks like we're focusing on a key document for IS auditors. What's an IS audit charter and why is it so important?
It's basically the IS audit team's mission statement. It lays out their authority, responsibilities, and reporting structure. It's all about setting the ground rules.
So it's like their blueprint for conducting audits, making sure they stay focused and within their scope.
Exactly. It ensures the audit work aligns with the organization's overall audit strategy and risk management framework.
Well, there you have it, folks. A peek behind the curtain of cybersecurity through the lens of a CISA exam. I feel like I've learned a ton, but I also might be just a little bit more paranoid now.
A little paranoia can be a good thing in the world of cybersecurity. It's all about awareness and taking proactive steps to stay safe.
That's a great point. So any key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember from our deep dive into these CISA exam questions?
The most important thing to remember is that cybersecurity is a team effort. Everyone in an organization needs to be involved, not just the IT department.
That's so true. We all play a part in protecting sensitive information. What are some simple things people can do to improve their cybersecurity hygiene?
Be very wary of phishing emails or any suspicious links you come across. Always verify the sender before clicking on anything or downloading files.
Oh yeah, those "you've won $1 million" emails are always tempting.
Right. And use strong passwords, of course. A mix of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols.
It's amazing how many people still use password 123 as their password.
I know, right? Consider using a password manager. It can really help keep track of all those complex passwords.
Good tip. What else should our listeners keep in mind?
Always keep your software and operating systems updated. Those updates often include important security patches. And remember, if anything seems off or suspicious, trust your gut and report it.
Better safe than sorry. So of all the questions we covered today, is there one that really stood out to you?
You know, that one about user involvement in systems development really resonated with me. It highlights the fact that technology really should be designed with the people who'll be using it in mind.
That's such a crucial point. Technology should make our lives easier, not more complicated.
Exactly.
Well said. And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into cybersecurity. A huge thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise.
It was my pleasure. I hope this discussion has been insightful and encourages our listeners to think more about cybersecurity in their own lives.
It definitely has.
Yeah.
And for those who want to explore specific topics even further, don't forget to check out the show notes for additional resources.
And tune in to our next episode where we'll be delving into the world of ethical hacking and penetration testing.
Oh yeah, we'll be talking to a real ethical hacker to get their insights on finding vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
It's going to be fascinating.
Can't wait. Until then, stay safe in the digital world, everyone. Knowledge is power when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening how overlooking those details, like involving users early on, can have such a huge impact down the line.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to what we've been saying about the human factor. Technology is great, but it needs to be designed with the people who'll be using it in mind, for sure. Well, I think we've done a pretty thorough job today, wouldn't you say? We've covered so much, from phishing to disaster recovery, and wow, I'm definitely more aware of the risks now, maybe even a little paranoid.
A little bit of healthy paranoia is a good thing when it comes to cybersecurity, I think. It's not about being afraid, but about being prepared, you know?
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So before we sign off, is there one big takeaway you hope our listeners will remember from all of this?
I think the most important thing to remember is that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just up to the IT guys or some fancy software, you know.
It's a team effort, for sure. We all have a part to play in keeping things secure.
Exactly. Even those small things like being careful about suspicious emails or using strong passwords, they really do add up.
And keeping our software updated, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, folks, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into cybersecurity. A huge thanks to you for being here and sharing your expertise.
It was my pleasure. I hope this has inspired everyone to, take their cybersecurity a little more seriously.
I'm sure it has. And for anyone who wants to explore specific topics in more detail, remember to check out the show notes. We've got lots of resources linked there.
And don't miss our next episode where we'll be talking about ethical hacking and penetration testing.
That's right. We'll have a real ethical hacker joining us to share their insights on how to find and fix vulnerabilities before the bad guys exploit them.
It's going to be an exciting one, so be sure to tune in.
Stay safe out there in the digital world, everyone, and keep learning. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.